guys, we're being a bit broad here, and I definitely want to get us back on track. That is to slay the mighty dragon. That is Travis Gafford's outrageous ego on this topic. And then I'm happy to talk about any
Let's do it then.
past transgression. So, as I said, the reason that this entire thing is being debated is that Travis Gafford, a man who leveraged a good deed into a career with no journalistic credentials or background that I know of, you know, and went on to be essentially a corporate mouthpiece for years for this company, while doing it under the guise of, hey, I'm an independent journalist, y'all. And then whenever anyone called him out, he said, I don't like to use the J word, actually, not when there's, you know, culpability for the things I do. This is what I mean about him being a jellyfish. But he put this out because he tried to make it look like he was rallying the troops, that he was the guy who was saying, I'm going to do a boycott, right? Like it even says in his title, my coverage is changing because of this outrageous new policy by Riot Games. A policy, remember, people are really glossing over this. A policy he was happy to play along with when he thought he would get the best answers in the quickest time and still be able to scoop his opposition with Riot approval. Now, one of the reasons I find it absolutely egregious that Travis Gafford would be the man to draw attention to this man has took a stand for nothing in his life. I mean, nothing. This is a man who has no backbone, no moral center. This is a man who's just happy to have money rolling in as much as he can and lead his California lifestyle, right? And get to talk about one of the most popular video games in the world. A serious journalist he is not. So I at least respect him for not having the outrageous attitude to use that word when describing himself. So
but he used to. But he used to, Rich. He used to. That's what bothers me.
At least he realizes now. So let's talk about Travis Gafford. What stand should you have taken? I was going to ask you when you were giving your story, Jacob, while you were getting hauled over the coals for the Rocks story, did Travis Gafford say anything about this?
Of course he didn't. He actually
did he offer any support for you privately?
Actually in that event, what I remember kind of most distinctly about that Chicago event is that he was getting a ton of access and no one else was, and he was constantly like in the corner of the media tent. We were right outside the theater in this like giant white tent. It was a ton of Chinese press, English press, right? I think EGG was still in the quarters at that point, so a huge contingency from Asia, considering SKT, EDG, and Rocks were still in it. And he like it was almost like he was almost part of the Riot PR team in terms of the way he was interacting. Like those were his buddies. And those people, the people that were at that event acting like that with him, they know that some of them still work at Riot, some of them do not. But none of them actually still work in Riot PR's department for the LCS and for esports, which is quite interesting now that there's some tension when all those people are gone.
Right.
But it was, I mean, he was like constantly in conversation with those people, sitting with those people, kind of on this like different plane than the rest of us in the way that he acted during that event. And that's what I remember. And so during the whole Rocks thing, you know, like I felt super alone. It took like a month to be vindicated for all of that. And there was a lot of press that like threw me under the bus or ignored me. And it felt like crap because a month later it came out I was right. But yeah, I mean, like that what I was going to say earlier, where I was kind of heading before we like dove into this like broader rabbit hole, is I've thought about like formalizing some sort of like collective body to go to Riot and just be like, here's kind of our expectation, right, of what we would like to see to cover League of Legends. And the problem I thought was like they could just say, fuck you, we're going with Travis. Like that was the whole reason I like could never do that. I felt like we didn't have any leverage because they had a way to interact with the public that wasn't us.
So not only did Travis not take a stand on that, right? He didn't take a stand on Reddit at all, in fact. Now, Reddit is an interesting one because what I've come to realize is in my young, naive, ideological purity, whatever the fuck days of 2014 before I realized just how much of a cesspool this business is. And actually, Reddit is like, I don't know, it's not even the fucking fleck of shit on top of the fucking pile of everything else. Like, it's actually not all that bad. In fact, it's par for the course now for a games developer to essentially control a subreddit. It's par for the course for companies like Epic Games to suppress people making genuine consumer complaints on Reddit. There was allegations of bribery of Reddit moderators. Reddit is just an astroturfed shithole. Nothing you see on Reddit is genuine. It's all manipulated. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it is literally manipulated by these companies too. Like, I get told, here's some facts for you guys. I have been told directly by companies that they employ bots to generate positive comments. Yeah, that they have hordes of people who will go in and like basically manipulate public opinion by posting on a variety of different accounts within threads or posting the content itself and upvoting it. Reddit is far from pure.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is it's losing. For the good esports websites, and again, most of this are like the successful ones, recurring successful ones. Reddit is losing a lot of its power. You know, when Rich and I worked at Daily Dot and worked for the esports section 5 years ago, it was king. It like dominated our month of referral traffic. It's not anymore. Google is actually
thankfully.
Google,
YouTube algorithm, God bless you.
If you go,
which is why they've got lax on all of the rules.
If you look at like Alexa website data for Dot and Dexerto, a lot of it is SEO traffic, which is good. It's another way to make revenue without having to rely on something that is wishy-washy as Reddit, because Reddit can really make or break a website.
So and to give you guys an example, this channel that you're going to see this on YouTube, the Inside on Esports channel, used to get, if you were on the front page of Reddit towards the top, like you could get 50,000 views. Right now, even though many of the shows on this channel reach the front page of their respective subreddits, right now it's at 2% of the viewership. It's all organic or YouTube algorithm traffic right now, which is good in many ways.
Well, I mean, I had a big feature story, two big feature stories at the beginning of this year. One about Sky Williams and one about a guy named Joshua Mullins, this teenager who tried to scam people in esports for $42 million. One of these like Holder stories of master forgery. And the Mullins story outperformed the Sky story. The Sky story was the top of the Smash Brothers Reddit, and the Mullins story had mostly Google referral traffic because it had TDK, Liquid, all of these like relevant teams that he tried to scam as a part of the story, right? Like that's because Google is a quite a powerful tool in a way that Reddit is not anymore. Thank God, because Reddit is way too wishy-washy.
So I'm just gonna list all of Travis's many crimes of silence, and then I'll bring Duncan in because you've had the dubious pleasure of working with him. So he didn't take a stand over Reddit moderators demanding to know sources directly from journalists, which goes to like Josh Raven, Jacob, William Turton, who just up and left, myself. Whenever we were like, hey, Travis.
My last video was the same thing.
Yeah, whenever we were like, hey, Travis, you're the big name. Yeah. You must have some opinion on this. Well, Reddit's a complicated business. Then when they banned his content or his content got deleted, he would go crying to anyone who would listen. Never took a stand for the collective, always took a stand for himself. Then when I got banned and unpersoned on Reddit in which is one of the most ridiculous things to ever happen, a complete fabrication tissue of lies orchestrated by seriously mentally ill people who, by virtue of having moderator status on a particularly large subreddit, thought they could get away with doing absolutely anything. And so didn't say anything about that. In fact, said, well, Richard, you are kind of an abrasive guy. He was happy to stand by and watch a journalist be censored. Also, conflict of interest. Not really something Travis Gafford seems to care too much about, is it? I mean, we all remember the fucking free hot tub holidays for Travis Gaff,
Jesus
right?
Christ! Why? After the Kris Badawi story, by the way, the first one, which I was talking about that the other day. It was like 7 claims by 7 teams in that, and 2 of them were right. Cloud9 and Liquid were truthful, and all the
most of them were live.
Shit. One of them, the Team Impulse one, was like, I just plain don't like the guy. I felt like I was reading, like, playing Civilization 6 and being denounced, like, I just plain don't like you. Like, turn 20. Like, Jesus Christ. Like,
yeah. So
my favorite one was TSM lying. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, didn't have a problem with any of that. Has never had a problem with Riot Games taking strong arm action against any of the journalists that we've talked about here. Certainly as well, and this is perhaps crucial to the bit that'll tee you up here, Duncan. This is a man who, by the way, has been happy to make agreements with Riot about what questions are broached to get the content that serves his needs. And I know this to be true because I would urge anyone to go and watch his blockbuster Frost Nixon style interview with Mark Merrill from December 18th, 2019. This was a year almost after revelations of systemic sexism and other atrocities inside Riot Games had been revealed. And it was up to Travis Gafford, investigative journalist extraordinaire, to sit down with the big man, Mark Merrill. Remember, Mark Merrill, a man who reportedly cried at a town hall in front of all of the women that his company had let down and said, I just feel like I could have done more. Because it's always about that narcissist, isn't it? It's always about him. I can see why him and Travis feel like kindred spirits in a lot of ways. So he sat down with Mark Merrill and put the video out on December 18th, 2019. And there's a question in there. One question. Diversity and inclusion issues at Riot. And you go, well, this will be juicy. Except it's not juicy. Except what actually happens is Travis says, I think it's great. Oh, it's so sickening to watch. I think it's great you're addressing these issues. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that process. And so,
a lot of softballs in this interview. Some of them are mad. Some of them almost like, put it this way: there's a point in the interview where the joke would be Travis forgets he's on camera and starts trying to pretend he's the earpiece in Joe Biden's ear. Because at one point in time, right, Mark Merrill makes some outrageous comment like, does it really matter? You know what we did as well? And then I'm like, well, I think what you mean by that. You know, like, like he was playing defense with the guy.
Yeah, he literally did. He said, Mark Merrill said, I don't think it really matters what you say. And Travis Gafford went, when you said earlier that it doesn't matter, I mean, it does matter what you mean to say was. And he basically was the positive Kathy Newman. He came to his rescue.
It was the Key and Peele Obama anger translator. Like,
yes,
that's exactly what it was.
It was absolutely unfucking real, by the way. And so anyway, here's what I know about that interview. There are only two ways you sit down with Mark Merrill, and it's quite telling, by the way. I'm sure Travis had a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling every time Riot Games were in one of their many disasters and negative headlines. Who's the man they went to see? Travis Gafford. He thought that was a feather in his cap. It means you're a fucking bought and paid for shill, you stupid fucking cunt. And you should have been looking at in the mirror and asking yourself hard questions every time they wanted to sit down with you so you could disseminate their message. But you're too fucking greedy and too fucking short-sighted for that, which is why you're not sat here taking your licks like anyone else would. You are a fucking narcissist posing as a journalist. So what he did was he basically must have either agreed that we won't go too hard on the woman stuff, right? In which case you have actively engaged in the process you are now decrying, or you didn't have the backbone to ask the hard questions, in which case you are not fit for fucking purpose as a fucking journalist. So, spiel over for Travis Gafford, hot tub meta pioneer, to fucking sit and talk about how it's wrong a Riot and how he's going to take the stand for all his other journalists. You never took a stand once. The only person you stand for is your fucking self. That and trust me, as I said, I always held back a little bit out of respect, but me and him aren't the same. We don't do the same thing. We don't have the same goals. So no, what is the point of holding back and respecting what he does? He is a blight. He is the manifest horror of access journalism if you don't check it early. Right.
Yeah, and while I agree with his points that he made in the video about pre-submitting questions, I agree with them wholeheartedly. I agree with basically everything that he said within this video, and I think he's right. I also, Richard, the problem with Travis is that what investigative journalists do is that they are duty and honor bound to a code of ethics, right? That is bigger than themselves. And what's so suspicious is that Travis has always behaved in a way that shows that he has no basically ethical center or moral compass whatsoever. And so it's very difficult to trust him or in any capacity at this point in time for all the reasons that you've stated. Whereas, I'm sitting here with four esports journalist of the year awards between the three of you, right? And so you all have very clear ideas about what is the moral center that you're going after. And you may disagree on certain points, but at least like there is that guiding light that makes you trustworthy because you are accountable to your own ethical compass. And I think that's what's missing with Travis. And that's fine. Like if he doesn't want to be a journalist, then don't be a journalist, but you can't simultaneously do these interviews and then try and break news that is supposed to be objective, right? Because it calls that news into question, even though I think in this instance, he's right. It does make me wonder if he's telling the whole truth in many ways, or what his motivation is for doing that, because it doesn't seem to adhere to some sort of higher power. And my other issue with it was that we alluded to earlier, is that he himself has engaged in these practices. And when I mentioned this on Twitter, a lot of people were saying, well, it's not the same, Monty. This is a corporation and it's his show and he can do what he wants. Well, it's Riot's company, it's their product, they can do what they want, so that logic doesn't apply. But also, it's the same principle, because we have to talk about why you don't pre-submit questions for those people who don't know this. And it's because if you are a trusted person within the scene of an esport or a sport or in the circle of journalism, people recognize that you have a certain level of professionalism. And what happened was I wanted to go on a show that Jacob was on, which was Hotline League. And I wanted to ask a Riot employee who no longer works at Riot some questions. And the Riot employee said I could come on the show. And Travis was engaging with me for an hour or more saying, like, I need you to pre-submit your questions because he didn't want me to ask stuff on the air. And I kept telling him, look, if I say something that's stupid, I'm going to look stupid. Okay, this is my reputation, not yours. You're just going to be sitting there, man. Like the only thing you're going to get out of this is clicks for your content, right? But he didn't want to bite the hand that fed him, or have me bite it in that case, which by the way, I was not going to do because I didn't want to make a big deal out of this. I had some real questions about the LCS that I wanted to ask. He was afraid I was going to ask, dig into this guy. But honestly, show me one time in my entire career where I have done that directly to a person where we are on a mutual ground, where we're having a discussion. I'm not unreasonable to people. I'm professional in those environments. I understand. It's not like it's the same thing. Like as much as I've complained about Riot's actions, have I ever done it on a League of Legends broadcast? No, I haven't, because it's not the time for it, right? I'm a professional at the end of the day. I reserve that for my own content, for my own social media, and I leave the broadcast where it deserves to be, which is alone and free of that material.
Nothing. It's fealty.
I know. But so, and the other thing is that Travis, as he always does, he's done this to Thorin too, is that he will delete the content after the fact that he doesn't like. And he deleted, so he let me on the show after the Riot former Riot employee
mine's gone by the way. My appearance on Hotline League where context, Hunter Lay, the whatever his position is, GM of Golden Guardians or SVP of esports at Golden Guardians, whatever his official title is, ex-Rioter, worked at GameSpot before that.
Boss.
This was Chopper. This was Riot.
No. I was saying in my case.
Oh, okay.
Hunter was on the show. It was after his first split as running Golden Guardians, and he went on and just laid into his coaching staff, laid into his players, blamed High like super hard for being a terrible in-game leader, yada yada yada. Just flamed his own team after they performed poorly in their first split. So Mark Z brought me onto the show, and I said, okay, like my first thing out of the gate was like, Hunter, how are you qualified to have this job? You've never done team management your entire life. How are you qualified to have this job? Shouldn't you accept some blame for this, right? You put this team together. You put this staff together. You hired your buddies, Spellsy and others, right, to manage this team, and they failed. Shouldn't you accept some blame? You ran this thing, and like after the show, like Travis was like, I hate Jacob, yada yada yada, and I went looking for that VOD the other day, and it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah,
because
and
I went on.
You
and
mean
said
he's
that.
actively censoring content that's not favorable to the viability of his broadcast? Wow, crazy.
But he deleted the first episode that he did with Thorin that spawned Summoning Insight in the first place. When Thorin went on and challenged him about a bunch of stuff, he deleted the part of Hotline League where I went on afterwards and basically complained on his show to him and Mark and said, "Hey, this isn't right. This isn't good journalistic ethics. I just wanted to have a reasonable conversation about stuff I was curious about in the LCS. I wasn't trying to entrap this person or make myself look bad, right?" So I don't really understand it. It goes against the kind of common practices where you can't respect someone else. And I also said to Travis, I would never do this to you in a million years. Like, anybody can come on the show and say whatever the fuck they want. I don't care. I'm not Jacob, you weren't pre-screened for what you were going to say. We'll never do that. But
no, and by the way, me and Duncan are very notably at odds on some things. And look, and we're here being professional. We're having a conversation. It's fine. It's fine. You can disagree with
he
people.
Is worryingly quiet, Jacob. That should,
no, but am I, Duncan? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Like, am I wrong? Like, we're at odds on some things.
Yeah, you should obviously be able to put minor things behind you, sure.
Yeah, but when push comes to shove, right? When Monty asked me to come on the show, I didn't I was just like, okay. Fine, this is an important topic. We can talk
Jacob,
about
you're not
this.
a coward, and I admire that about you. So, and also, it's also like, obviously, we're capable of having a reasonable conversation, which is the purpose of the show. So my point is like, and I don't care. Maybe Travis was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that, right? That was a shitty thing for me to do. I learned from this. Then all he has to do is say like, I did this previously. I'm sorry to Monty. I don't agree with this anymore. I learned from that experience, and then we just all move on with our lives.
He was running the same shit with me. I wanted to get him on the podcast.
He's actually incapable of saying he's wrong.
He wanted a pre-meeting before the podcast. He was going to come on the Richard Lewis show. I even consider, if I ever want a podcast, it says two things. It says, I think you've got something interesting to say, and that our conversation could be interesting, and that it's also kind of an olive branch that, like, I'm never going to platform someone who I think is, like, completely morally fucking repugnant. So, and this was a few years ago. So, or a couple, I don't know. And so I was like, I wanted to get him on, and he just kept giving me the runaround and go, can we have a meeting? Can we talk about the show before the show? And I'm like, you can't be fucking serious that you're saying this now. Like, he is just image obsessed. He wants to be the guy with the mic in his hand on TV, everyone looking at him, thinking he's cool, but he's got none of the chops to do it. He's not even a particularly good interviewer. Like, he's not a particularly charismatic guy. He doesn't have, like, he doesn't ask hard-hitting questions. I've never understood the fascination, frankly. And when I said he leveraged a good deed into a career, let's be clear, that is exactly what he did. That is exactly what he did. It was a time when you could do stuff like that. And if the community liked you and you blew up on Reddit, you got away with it. I mean, fuck, man. Even D-Man leveraged fucking Reddit to get himself a job.
It is very much first... It's a first movers policy, right? Like, I don't think he's like the worst interviewer in the world, but I don't think he's good as Ashley Kang, right? Or like someone of the cut, right?
I think Ashley Kang is just a multilingual Travis Gafford. So I guess
Ashley has a lot. Knowing her, she has a lot more standards than Travis, which I appreciate.
She watches the game a lot more. I'll tell you that much. She's putting in the time to try and know what she's talking about. Not always
she plays the same game with pandering to people who would actively harm journalism, though.
It's that element, for sure.
As long as her content can be on the front page, she'll let every other journalist fucking burn in the Hades of non-access those Reddit moderators.
There was some tension with Riot. There was some tension with Riot and MSI and Damwon recently, which you saw her post a little bit about, and I thought that was like the whole scheduling thing where they gave RNG the first play day when Damwon was supposed to, and I think she handled that fairly well, better than he would have, frankly.
Okay.
In the same position, but I mean, like there are a lot of other people that are better interviewers than him, but he was here first, right? Like, and I mean, hell,
Here
we're
first,
streaming.
I'm friends with a super popular player.
Yeah.
God.
And well, we're streaming on a platform that has a lot of issues that also gets a lot of first movers bonus, right? Twitch has a lot of problems, but is successful partly because they were first to do it.
Yes. Let me do my little rant then.
Yeah,
so basically,
there you go.
I don't have like a million like super secret stories or anything like that. Like I don't actually have that big a personal issue with Travis. Like, if you notice, I've very rarely ever fired shots at him. I'll do the odd joke on like a talk show, but yeah, that's just grist for the mill, isn't it? Anyone can get in on that. The reason why I don't tend to typically attack him publicly is just because I thought generally Travis, first of all, because he did work with me, he's been generally smart enough to just sort of stay in his lane and not try and veer into my domain when I'm in the League of Legends journalism world. He just stays in his lane and does his interviews and posts his videos when he has his problems. But I've always, and even when I knew him as a colleague, would have considered him certainly an acquaintance, someone I've met up many times with. I've always been very, very disappointed by his refusal to actually like uphold standards across the rest of the industry that don't just involve his literal bottom line that fucking day. Because he won't stand for anyone. You basically have to be his best friend, as far as I can tell, before he'll fucking take any form of stand in your half. And even then, by the way, you probably have to be one of his friends that literally depend on him like for their fucking livelihood. Like their content goes on his channel. He got them the interviews. He's the one who made them by getting like. There's also that element which I've never been a huge fan of personally, because it's one thing when you help someone and you almost tell them like, look, I've helped you now. You know, just go up. Don't bother thanking me for it. Just take it. Go do what you want. When you always sort of keep them on the hook of like, yeah, but I made you. Like I've always thought there's something sinister behind the scenes there. So here's what I'll say is this, right? I think of all the incidents over history. There was the one with Jacob and the whole Rocks Tigers thing. You don't even have to know anything about that situation. I made a video about exactly this topic, which said I'd heard similar stories, like a certain team in NA is probably signing this player. So I knew it was possible that these players could be going. But the point of my video essentially was just if you appreciate the very premise of like journalistic integrity and the editor system where they have to like verify that you actually have the fucking sources, in theory, you can trust that. I don't need to know the specifics of who the people are. I just have to know that they're doing this particular method and that this is different from just anyone putting a story out. So the idea, as it was alluded to back then, that like fucking forget Riot and the rest of them, like Reddit mods should have any say in whether it was just a legitimate source or not. Like, no, nonsense stuff. All someone like Travis has to do there, by the way, is just do a simple tweet. Doesn't even have to be about Jake, could be about the premise. Just do a retweet of a tweet and something simple. Just show that you at least agree with the premise. Like, they're not just going to silence people. Then there was obviously the one, like Richard said, with Loco Doco, where even though Loco to this day has never said anything because he pussied out by going, well, I've got an NDA, but as soon as that's up, and then he magically left League of Legends when that was up. So you'll never get the real story of that. I'll give you the gist, though. Basically, Loco made like a very, very mildly off-color sexual joke in a context which almost directly asked for it. The person receiving this question / answer was just sort of like, okay, didn't see anything wrong with it, but I basically heard Riot and potentially even Travis and other people were just like outraged, literally clutching clothes on behalf.
He compared,
oh my God, what's going on here? Yeah, go on.
If I remember right, because I reported on the story when he was fired, the joke
wasn't fired. His access was removed.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, because he was working for Golden Guardians at the time. That was in the same cloth.
Yes.
Because he was doing a piece of interview content with Riot. If I remember right, and I think he's in the chat.
Sounds right. Yeah.
If I remember right, the joke was that a mic sock, one of these, right? Yeah. Was that he thought the first time he saw it in Korea or something that it was a condom. That was the joke.
That's how mild we're talking, by the way. And this was literally treated, by the way, as he'd made some like outrageous sexual remark to a woman, like, oh, I'd like to fuck you off the internet. That was like the level it was presented on, because it's another thing Riot always does, by the way. When they fuck you completely over the most petty minor thing, they'll purposely leave it as vague as possible so people could read the most heinous shit into what you're doing. Meanwhile, when we reported that, by the way, when we reported on that, I was like super, super tactile in the words, right? Like, in terms of like nobody said he harassed anyone, nothing. Okay. Made a sexual remark. That's it. Yes. Right? Like that was it. No harassment or something.
It, by the way.
Yeah, but people like did spin it. You're right. People did spin it to be a lot worse. That he sexually harassed someone or that, like whatever, which he didn't.
But that's another thing. That's another thing.
Riot are the ones making a judgment about that as well. I mean, it's fucking unreal, isn't it? No, here's the other thing I was going to say, though. Because what's outrageous is these are just easy ones to take a stand on. Like I say, even though he does know all the people involved, you don't even have to know the people. You just look at it and go, this is an obvious fucking injustice, abuse of power, and sets a terrible precedent for the industry, which, spoiler, I work in as a fucking journalist. But because Travis thinks he is the made man, because he thinks he is hooked into the Riot fuckboy network, he imagines he will always be the one who's allowed to get away with this, even though, by the way, it ignores a basic premise of human psychology, which is whenever you have a group that is based around some fucked up premise of purity, as you narrow down the group and kick out the ones that are impure, now the one at the edge just becomes the one on the fringe. Inevitably, why they all, literally every one of these revolutions ends with them all shooting each other in the side of the fucking head. It's just the way it goes. So the sad thing is this, right? Then you add this in. Not only does Travis do all that, but as Richard and Monty just told a story here, that he directly went out of his way to give them just enough rope to believe they could be on his show, as though, again, they should be grateful they can appear on his fucking platform. But then also treated them like they had to crawl through fucking an Andy Dufresne type shit tunnel for 2 miles to prove themselves worthy to be on his mighty podcast. Meanwhile, here's a detail for you, Richard. The Reddit mod, his name is Tom Shoe. I don't make the fucking names up. You put your name on the internet, dickhead. I assume that's a fucking alias. This guy, Tom Shoe, who's a top Reddit mod, who bragged about being the one who removed my video about Alfari and the whole Jat situation. But reason given, the real reason from Reddit mods was that it had basically allegations that hadn't been confirmed by confirmed sources. So essentially, they just want me to tell them who my sources are. Otherwise, I'm not allowed to have the video. By the way, whatever. If that's the way they want to do it. This same guy, are you ready for the ultimate punchline of all time, guys? He is apparently someone who regularly calls in to Hotline League and is allowed to appear. There's the joke. So, like I said before about how it's the other way around, I'm going to treat Riot with contempt based on what they've done in this industry. Travis wants to tell Richard and Monty, I don't think you're really ready enough to join the big boys table and come onto my show. Oh, what's that? A corrupt Reddit mod who's a piece of shit, lying all the time. Yeah, just come on, mate. You just say whatever you feel like,
well, just one thing as well. Like I said, I didn't want to say it when I was listing all his sins, but Jacob and Duncan and maybe Monty as well can clarify this. The way I remember the Loco Doco thing was that when Loco Doco was accused, and I didn't report on it because by that point I was like,
you were out.
Waste of time. But I remember hearing exactly that he just said, "Oh, he thought it was a condom or something," and that was as far as it went. But then it was the person he'd said it in front of that was supposedly the one we were protecting was absolutely okay with it.
She was not okay. She was not mad. Yeah.
Yes. But Travis took it upon himself to drive the outrage internally. And I had a number of people tell me this. Oh, you'll never guess your old friend Travis is up to this. So again, put that in the context of what we're talking about here. Travis, why my approach to coverage is changing. This guy actively leveraged a nothing burger to eliminate a potential competitor. Fuck you. You don't get to talk about journalism, buddy. You don't get to talk about journalistic ethics. You have none.
I had one more thing to say before I forget, which just goes like this. The other thing I really despise about his approach to journalism and this is he doesn't fucking do disclaimers. Here's the thing. The reason I'll always bang on about disclaimers is they're easy as fuck. So for example, does everyone like that tool called ProView in League of Legends where you can watch all the players moving and their clicks, right? I actually have some of the shares in that company. Now, has that ended the whole segment? Is everyone just tuned out? Is no one no, it's that one second just means I've got literally a complete disclaimer out there that you understand what my self-interest is in telling you that's a good program. Now, hopefully, you also would think I'm a legitimate individual and wouldn't just say that because of a financial interest. But by saying it, I also just get it out the way. You can account for my bias, right? Travis, his fucking Rolodex of friends is a who's who of corrupt crony fucking nepotism in the esports industry. So he's best pals with Hunter Lay, the person that you just talked about earlier, Jacob, who was literally our stand-in boss while our real boss was doing fucking benders in the Mile High Club, snorting more than fucking people who were would be extradited from Colombia. This guy was just the stand-in boss. He then works for Golden Guardians. Now, when Travis is interviewing from Golden Guardians, does he ever bother mentioning stuff like, by the way, you were my boss in the past? No, why the fuck would he mention that? He wouldn't want you to know.
No. They were roommates, Duncan, even better.
That's one.
They lived together.
And then they also
Think about how many times on his fucking content he's had Nick Allen, literal friend of his, rioter, CLG employee. Fuck, how many things has this cocksucker not been involved in? Again, when you do these interviews, you must literally stress at key moments when it's a question that would be related to this. Like, you, of course, did work for Riot previously. You have to do that. If you don't do it, you are literally a joke. You are like that fucking classic George Orwell quote, like, journalism is printing what other people don't want printed. Everything else is just public relations. You're just public relations, Travis.
Also, Nick Allen was out there standing for Taylor Lorenz as well. By the way, sorry, Christopher, jump in.
We'll just say
one just went out on the record.
I will give Nick Allen credit for one thing. He does have, and this is real, one of the funniest tweets of all time. He has a tweet that does say something.
Yes.
It's real. It's from 2011. It just says, like, I see Bitcoin's not even made it to $2 a pop. Glad I didn't get it on that shit.
It is really funny.
I was in it, but that was fucking perfect. Just too good.
So about Hunter Lee too, you have to remember that he used to work for Riot for League Ops, right? And
yes,
so that's the other problem is that the when Golden Guardians was formed and he went over, because I believe the sequence was he worked for On Gamers, right? And then he worked for Riot.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he worked for Golden Guardians.
So he went directly, I believe, from Riot to Golden Guardians, which is like it's like when and
they recommended him for that job by that way. And the big reason he got that job, as I understand, is he already lived in the Bay Area. So he left Riot. There was a period of a couple months where he left Riot to move to the Bay Area to be with his family. Right? They're based in the Bay Area. They recommended him for the job. When the Warriors got in, he got the job. That's the sequence of events.
And what's so interesting about this is it's like, when a government official goes and like joins a lobbyist organization right afterwards or joins a private company that is then, discussing with the government and has all the connections over there. Also, suspiciously, Hunter Lee was the one who fired Loco Doco.
That's right. That's right.
So they recommend him for this position. And anyway, it just gets all so incestuous, but this stuff is just never... It's never reported on for some reason.
Yeah.
It's the guy who's the main fucking reporter in the game is involved directly in all this shit. They're his mates. He's literally turning Monty and going, shall I just drop dime on all your... Nah, fuck it. Let's just go with double lifting this karaoke now. Fuck. And then, like, literally, by the way, when he did those interviews we referred to earlier, where he was in Hawaii, I believe it was Hawaii, right? With Team Liquid and a bunch of other people. He's doing interviews with them. Literally, every one of those interviews, my dude, has to start with, and I was flown here by Team Liquid. Thanks to them for that. This is essentially like an unofficial sponsored segment.
Yes.
No, of course not. Let's just do interviews with people about their teams, how competent they are at their jobs, what players they've signed, while they're in. You're basically literally being. And by the way, think about any other field in the world. People go crazy when like a politician gets like a donation to his charity, when a fucking a doctor gets one of those gift baskets with the fucking $250 champagne and the caviar. This guy's doing shit like that on an esports interview level. He's not even in some massive fucking field. He's literally selling out for fuck all just to get he was doing a hot tub 5 years ahead of everyone else. This cunt.
What maybe bothers me most about that specific moment, by the way, is when like Richard and Sam Lingle and I like called that shit out 6 years ago. I was the +1 of someone else who was on this trip. They did not invite me directly. That doesn't make it any better.
No,
it doesn't make it any better.
I was simply brought to wallow in the opulence.
I know.
Are you not able to just say no? Right? Like
you can't even make this shit up, man.
This was ESPN's rule, and I've just lived by it the rest of my career since working there. ESPN's rule was anything more than $75 as a gift, you have to say no to. So like, somebody can buy me lunch, that's fine. But if they buy me a fucking computer, I have to send it back, or I have to donate it to charity. I got a box from Riot once full of just like all this shit. Bunch of hardware and everything, and I took it to the Disney charity office on the ESPN campus and handed them all of it. It was like, please get rid of this, send it to charity. And it all went to charity. Because like, and it's just like, but he's taking a vacation to Hawaii and he's like, I'm the +1. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference. You say no. Like, that's just what you do.
That's why the Timo hats meme was so good. The Reddit moderators were like, yeah, we took gifts from Riot staff, probably in exchange for favorable moderation, but it was only Timo hats. Yeah, then you're a dickhead. You had a position of leverage and you sold out for a fucking novelty hat. You fucking morons. Yeah, mind blowing. Esports, baby.
All right. I'm gonna.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.